My girlfriend said, "Your apartment is embarrassing." "I'm not bringing friends over," I said. "Fair enough." Then I stopped paying for her Uber rides and dinner dates. When she realized she'd have to start using public transit, I, 27, male, have been dating Lila, 25, for about 8 months. Things started great. We'd met through a dating app and hit it off instantly. She was charming, beautiful in that effortless way that draws attention in any room, and she seemed genuinely interested in me at first. I work in IT support, not glamorous, but stable. I make around $65,000 a year, enough to live comfortably and still put a little aside each month. Leela, on the other hand, worked part-time at a boutique perfume shop, earning maybe $20,000 a year on a good one. She lived with 3 roommates in a shared house that smelled perpetually of lavender and hairspray. It wasn't better than my place, just bigger because 4 people split the rent. But somehow, she carried herself like she was doing me a favor by being there from the start. I'd been the one covering most of our expenses. Dinners, movies, concerts, weekend trips. I didn't mind at first. I liked taking care of someone I cared about. But soon, it became an expectation rather than a kindness. She'd sigh dramatically when I didn't immediately offer to pay for her Uber to my place. "Parking's impossible in your area," she'd complain, and I'd cave, sending her $40 without hesitation. On average, each visit from her cost me close to $100 between transportation and dinner. I didn't keep track at first. Love makes you stupid like that. But the pattern was there long before I admitted it to myself. Then came the little digs. The soft jabs, disguised as jokes. "Don't you think it's time to upgrade? This neighborhood is kind of basic. The building looks sketchy from outside." Each one landed like a pinprick, and I brushed them off, telling myself she didn't mean it that way. But when that embarrassing apartment text arrived, something in me finally clicked. I replied simply, "Fair enough. Let's meet at the restaurant instead." "Perfect," she said. "Can you send me Uber money? Surge pricing's crazy right now." "Actually," I typed back, "I think you should start handling your own transportation from now on. See you at 7. Silence for 20 minutes. Then, "Are you serious right now?" "Very." When she finally showed up, 45 minutes late and slightly frizzed from the rain, she was fuming but trying to hide it. Her friend's boyfriend and I shared a knowing glance across the table. Leela tried to laugh, act unbothered, but the cracks showed. When the bill came, I paid for my half. Her friend's boyfriend did the same. Lila froze. "Didn't bring my card," she whispered, eyes darting nervously. I took a sip of water and nodded toward the ATM across the street. That night, I realized how fragile her illusion of control was. For months, she'd been used to me picking up every tab, solving every inconvenience, absorbing every complaint like it was my job. The moment I stopped, she unraveled. Over the next 2 weeks, I held my ground. No more Uber money, no more covering dinners. She started taking the bus, always late, always irritated, and tried the forgot my wallet trick twice more. Each time, I just smiled and told her I'd wait while she grabbed it. The texts started changing tone. First, "You're being petty." Then, "This is financial abuse." Then, "I was just being honest about your apartment." By the time she asked to talk about it, I already knew where things were headed. But surprisingly, I wasn't dreading it. I felt calm, maybe even relieved. If my clean, modest apartment and expecting her to pay her own way made me uncomfortable, then maybe I'd been dating the wrong kind of person all along. The next day, We met at a cafe. She showed up 20 minutes late again, soaked from the drizzle and clearly annoyed. I bought my own coffee. She pouted and ordered free water. Then she crossed her arms and said, "This is insane, Evan. You're punishing me for being honest." "I'm not punishing anyone," I said quietly. "You said my place was embarrassing. I just adjusted accordingly. What arrangement? You're my boyfriend. You're supposed to take care of me." That line, the entitlement behind it, hit me like cold water. "You're 25, Lila, not 5. You have a job, a part-time job. You know I'm trying to focus on my influencer career." Her career consisted of 1,800 followers and one was sponsored post for a teeth whitening kit that paid her $50. I almost laughed. "Instead," I said, "I can't keep subsidizing your influencer dreams while you insult where I live." She stared at me like I'd just spoken another language. "Garrett never made me pay for anything," she snapped her ex. The one she'd called toxic and controlling. Apparently, controlling meant he didn't let her max out his wallet. "Then maybe you should date Garrett," I said calmly. "Maybe I should. At least he knew how to treat a woman." I stood up. "Then go find him." That's when the tears started, loud, theatrical, the kind that drew stares from every corner of the cafe. "You can't just walk away. We're having a conversation." "No," I said. "You're having a tantrum. I'm going home to my embarrassing apartment." I left her there, crying into her free water. By the time I got home, my phone had exploded, 63 texts in 4 hours, ranging from insults to desperate apologies to threats of exposing me online. I ignored every single one. The next morning, I woke up to a notification. I'd been tagged in one of her Instagram posts. She'd uploaded a long, angry rant. My photo included accusing me of being a broke manipulator who financially abused her. The irony almost made me laugh. But as I scrolled through the comments, half her followers cheering her on, half calling her out, I realized something important. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about her need to play the victim, even when the story didn't fit. And that's when the real chaos began. The post stayed up for nearly 12 hours before she deleted it, right after one of her own friends commented, "Didn't he take you to that $200 birthday dinner last month?" That single comment cracked her carefully built image wide open. But the damage was already done. By then, my phone was buzzing with calls from unknown numbers. I let them go to voicemail until one finally came through from a number labeled unknown caller. Against my better judgment, I answered, "Hello, is this Evan?" The voice was older, sharp but dripping with false politeness. "Yes." I said slowly, "This is Mrs. Porter, Lila's mother. I'm calling about your treatment of my daughter." For a second, I thought it was a prank. "My treatment of your daughter? She tells me you've cut her off financially and forced her to take the bus like some person who takes the bus." "She's an adult with a job," I replied evenly. "I'm not obligated to pay for her transportation. When a man dates my daughter, he should be prepared to provide for her. That's what a real man does." That was the moment I realized Leela's sense of entitlement wasn't born, it was inherited. "Ma'am," I said carefully, "your daughter called my home embarrassing. I'm not paying for someone who's ashamed of me. She was trying to help you improve by being honest. You're clearly not mature enough for a relationship." "You're right," I said, smiling faintly even though she couldn't see it. "I'm not mature enough for this kind of relationship." And I hung up. I blocked both of them that night. I wanted peace, not drama. But peace wasn't something Lila believed in. 2 days later, I got a Facebook message from Nina, one of her roommates. I'd met Nina a few times, smart, grounded, the opposite of Leela in every way. Her message started with, "Hey, sorry to bother you, but did you and Lila break up?" Then came the real bombshell. "She's been yelling at us to lend her Uber money so she can go fix things with you, and we're all freaked out. She also hasn't paid her share of utilities in 2 months, and keeps saying you're supposed to help her with that." I sighed and replied, "We broke up. I never agreed to pay her utilities. If she shows up here, I'm calling the cops." Nina responded almost instantly, "Got it. For what it's worth, your apartment seemed totally fine when I saw it." That made me laugh out loud. My supposedly embarrassing apartment was becoming a quiet sanctuary again. But that peace didn't last long. 3 days later, I was at work when I got a call from security. "Mr. Evans, there's a woman here claiming to be your girlfriend. Says it's urgent." I felt my stomach drop. Her name wouldn't happen to be Leela Porter, would it? "Yes, sir." I came down to the lobby and there she was, dressed like she was attending a red carpet event at noon on a Wednesday. Full makeup, hair perfectly styled, holding a Starbucks she absolutely couldn't afford. "Evan," she said, all smiles, as if nothing had happened. "We need to talk." "No, we really don't," I said. "Please leave." She tilted her head, that patronizing look she'd perfected. "Stop being dramatic. I forgive you for overreacting. You forgive me." "Yes," she said brightly. "I realize I was a bit harsh about your apartment. It's not that embarrassing kind of vintage, really. Anyway, I'm willing to compromise. You can keep living there for now, but we need to set a timeline for when you'll upgrade." The security guard beside me coughed to hide his laugh. I just stared at her, amazed at how deep her delusion ran. "Leela, we're broken up. There is no compromise. Please leave before I ask security to escort you out. You can't be serious over one little comment." "One little comment," I said, "plus months of taking advantage of me financially while contributing nothing." "I contributed," she snapped, her voice rising. "I helped you pick out those throw pillows." I blinked. "You mean the ones you insisted I buy for $80? They elevated your whole living room." The guard stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to leave." She pulled out her phone and started recording. "I'm documenting this harassment." The guard immediately shut that down. "Ma'am, this is private property. You cannot film here." She glared at me as security guided her toward the door, hissing, "This isn't over. You'll regret this when I'm famous." When she was finally gone, the guard turned to me, shaking his head. "Man, you dodged a bullet. I thought that was the end of it. I really did." But the next day, my landlord called. "Hey Evan, weird question. Did you authorize someone named Leela to inquire about upgrading your apartment?" I froze. "No, why?" "She called our office claiming to be your fiancé. Said you two were planning to move in together and wanted a 2-bedroom. Even asked if we could hold one that's opening next month. Tried to list herself as the primary resident for her business purposes. Sounded fishy, so I figured I'd check. Please note in my file that she's not authorized for anything," I said firmly. "And let your staff know not to share any details about me." "Already done," he said. "Sorry you're dealing with this." That should have been my cue to change my locks right then, but I didn't, not yet. The next morning, things got worse. 3 separate credit card companies emailed me about applications I never made, all with my information but her phone number and email address listed. I spent hours calling to report them as fraudulent, putting freezers on everything. Then Nina texted again. Heads up, Leela's telling everyone you two are back together. She's already trying to sell her bedroom furniture and saying you'll cover her rent until the lease ends. She somehow got a credit card and keeps bragging about it. I called the non-emergency police line and started a report, just to have a paper trail. The officer told me that unless she actually made purchases or opened accounts, it would be hard to press charges, but they documented it anyway. That night, just as I was about to relax, I got a call from my friend Tom. Dude, he said, sounding breathless. Why is your ex at the Mercedes dealership? What? I'm here getting my car serviced, and she's at the sales desk filling out paperwork. I heard her say something about her boyfriend wanting to surprise her, but needing her to handle the documentation. My stomach flipped. Call the police, now. By the time I got there, the police were already on site. Lila was crying loudly, surrounded by officers and dealership staff. This is a misunderstanding, she wailed. He told me he was buying it for me. He just changed his mind to humiliate me. The salesperson turned to me, clearly exhausted. You're Evan? Yeah, I said. And no, I never promised her a car. They'd already run her credit using one of the fraudulent cards and were minutes away from finalizing the lease. When the officer told her she was being charged with identity theft and attempted fraud, her meltdown was operatic. This is entrapment. He made me do this. No one forced you to use stolen information, the officer replied flatly. He manipulated me emotionally. I'm traumatized. You can explain that at the station, the officer said, leading her toward the squad car. As she was escorted out, she glared at me one last time. My mum is going to sue you. The salesman looked at me and shook his head. In 20 years, that's the wildest thing I've ever seen. And once, a guy tried to trade in a stolen tractor. I drove home that night with a police report in my passenger seat, and the strangest mix of emotions running through me. Anger, disbelief, and, weirdly enough, relief. Because for the first time in months, I knew exactly who Leela really was. And I knew I was finally free of her, or so I thought. A week after the dealership incident, I thought everything had finally quieted down. Leela was facing charges, my accounts were frozen for safety, and I'd started sleeping through the night again. Then, one Thursday morning, I opened my email and saw a subject line that made my heart sink. Formal notice of civil complaint, Porter v. Evans. Attached was a scanned letter from an attorney. Not just any attorney, it was signed by Carol Porter, her mother. Apparently, her mum actually was a lawyer. A very bad one. The letter accused me of inflicting emotional distress upon Ms. Leela Porter through the sudden withdrawal of financial and relational support, and demanded that I pay $25,000 in compensatory damages for reputational harm. I laughed so hard I almost dropped my coffee. It sounded like something written by ChatGPT's evil twin. Still, I did the smart thing, forwarded it to my cousin Rachel, who's a real attorney. Within 10 minutes, she called me, audibly trying not to laugh. Evan, this is the most amateurish legal document I've ever seen. It's not even filed with a court, it's just a scare letter, so I shouldn't be worried. I asked, worried? No, amused. Absolutely. But just to be safe, I'll draft a formal response. 2 days later, Rachel's reply went out. Short, clean, brutal. Your letter has no legal basis. Any further attempts to contact my client will be treated as harassment. Future correspondence should be directed to my office. And that was the end of the Porter legal dynasty. Or so I hoped. But Lila had one last act in her drama. About a month later, I was at the grocery store when I heard a voice behind me say, "You look good, Evan." I froze, turned around. There she was, hair darker, makeup toned down, wearing an apron with a store logo on it. "I work here now," she said softly. "Court said I needed to get a job to show rehabilitation. Can you believe that?" She let out a brittle laugh. "I can, actually," I said carefully. "I wanted to say, I'm sorry," she said, eyes flicking to the floor. "For everything." I studied her face. For the first time, she looked real. Not the curated, performative version I'd known. Just a person who'd finally hit the ground after floating on entitlement for too long. "I appreciate that," I said quietly. "I really do. But I think we both need to move on." She nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that." Then she added, almost wistfully, "You know, you really were too good for me." I didn't reply. I just smiled faintly and walked away. As I checked out, I glanced back once. She was wiping down a counter, staring off into space, like she'd just realized. The story she'd been telling herself had finally ended. And as I stepped into the parking lot, sunlight cutting through the clouds, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace, because sometimes the best revenge isn't confrontation. It's walking away and letting the truth do the heavy lifting.